Hello friends, this is Arvind Pal here. So we are back with the CMA sessions. Today our trainer ma'am will be talking about labor cost accounting and control. This is a continuation of the series which we started a couple of months ago. And the intention of this series is for the people who are interested in the CMA profession, they will get useful knowledge about the exam as well as the practical tips as well. So without much delay, I hand over the session to ma'am, Ms. CMA Jyotsna Rajpal. Please carry on, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arvind.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I welcome everyone here. And in last few sessions, we have seen the classification of cost, complete elements of the cost. Then we have discussed about material accounting, material cost control. And today in the series, we will be discussing about the labor cost and labor cost controls. First of all, I would like to mention here that labor cost is the second most important cost after material cost. Yeah, it's the second most important cost after the material cost. It's basically the payment towards the human resources. Whatever human resources we are utilizing to carry on our business, it is all this labor cost is incurred towards that. This cost can be divided into two parts. One is direct cost and another is indirect cost. In case of direct cost, it is basically paid to the workers who are doing their, who are pouring in their efforts to convert the raw material into the finished goods. Means we can simply call them direct wages. So whatever direct labor is being deployed in the production will be coming under this head, that is direct wages, and it is part of the prime cost. Then there are certain people who are not directly engaged in the process of manufacture, but they are indirectly supporting the process of manufacture, like the stores department, like lab, quality control, then accounts department, then stores department, then selling department, sales department, sales and marketing. So all these, then securities, then there are so many inside the production, like maintenance people are there. So they are not directly involved in the production, but their services are very important as far as our production activity is concerned. So these indirect labor costs are called, are usually booked under overheads, under the segment of overheads, and these usually these indirect people are being paid in the form of salaries. So we call them their remuneration as salaries, and the direct workers, to them we are paying, they are called wages. So here the overheads which we are incurring for the indirect cost, basically what kind of work they are doing in the business, in the manufacturing process, or under which department they are working, will decide that which overhead will be booked through this particular expenditure. Like if it is a salary of a production supervisor, if it is a salary of production manager, if it is a salary of production plant security person, so all these salaries will be booked under the production overheads. If there is a salary payment to accounts department people, then HR people, then overall administration people, salary of the non-executive directors, these all will be booked under the administration head, administration overheads. Then selling and distribution expenses, selling and distribution overhead will be booked when we are paying salaries to the sales manager, to the sales team, then distribution team. All these people will be payment to all these people will be booked under selling and distribution overheads. Next, yeah, we all know that Cost Accounting Standard 7 deals with the employee cost. It gives a very clear-cut indication that what all is to be included in the employee cost and what all is to be excluded from the employee cost. So there is no confusion, there is no doubt to include something in employee cost or not to include something in the employee cost. So here, what is to be included in employee cost is any payment in cash or kind to the human resources will be covered under the head employee cost as per CAS 7. Then we have to take gross payments. Whatever gross payments we are making to our staff will be included here in the employee cost. What is, difference between gross payment and net payment? Like gross payment is whatever is the cost to the company and net payment is whatever net amount you are paying to the employee, you are paying to the staff. Like I'm say a gross payment is 1 lakh to the company, but employee is getting in hand for only 80,000 rupees. So our employee cost will be affected by 1 lakh rupees, not by the 80,000 rupees. So because company has ultimately incurred that 1 lakh rupee to hire that particular person. So we have to consider here gross payments. Then bonus or profit sharing, whatever we have shared with the staff, that will be included in the employee cost. Then comes amortization. Amortization of any retirement benefit, amortization of any expenditure, that all will be covered under employee cost. This all will be included. Suppose to some employees we are paying retirement benefits, but those retirement benefits are say those are quite huge. So every year we are making the provision for them. So we are amortizing those expenses which have incurred in a particular year. So that amortization will also be part of the employee cost. Then comes any perquisites. If we are making any payment in cash or kind, definitely that is employee cost. But even if we are paying some benefits to the employees, some perquisites to the employees, that will also be included here. Suppose we have given a rent-free accommodation, suppose we have given electricity connection, we have given them a car, we have given them a leave travel concessions, whatever we have given them over and above the cash payments, that will also be part of employee cost. Then variance due to normal reasons. Suppose I have paid certain amount and there is some variation also. So there is some variance occurred on account of standard cost, application of the standard costing principles. That variance will also be part of the employee cost. This is a very specific provision. So we have to include all these expenses as employee cost as per CAS 7. Now comes what is to be excluded. What is to be excluded from the employee cost? First of all, the payment to non-executive directors, because non-executive directors are the people who are not directly involved in the working of the company. So payment, any payment made to them will become part of the overheads. That will not be part of the employee cost. Then idle time. Idle time, it is a time which has been spent by a worker or employee in the company, but they have not produced anything. That was like you can say, it was a work not done, nothing has been done during that time. That is the idle time. We will just discuss that in detail in the next slides to come. Then if we are having statutory penalties to the third parties, suppose any penalty has occurred on account of late payment of PF, on account of late payment of the ESIC. So all these penalties will not be included in the employee cost. Then abnormal payment. Any abnormal payment has been done. Like we have seen in this COVID year that companies have made payment to all their staff during the time when, time of lockdown, when there was no production, when there was no work done, but they made the payment. So that was an abnormal payment. So that will not be included in the employee cost. That will directly affect the costing profit and loss account. It will not go to the employee cost. Then recoveries from employees. If any, like we have seen that whatever perquisites we are giving to the employees, they are chargeable, they are to be added to the employee cost. Similarly, if we are recovering anything from the employee on account of those perquisites, suppose we have given them an and accommodation at subsidized rent. We are giving them a canteen facility at subsidized cost. We are giving them some stock option to the staff. That all will be whatever we are charging for that amount. So that will not be considered in the employee cost. That will be excluded from employee cost. Suppose I have got a gross payment of 1 lakh rupees, but against gross payment as perquisites, I have paid some 5,000 rupees towards those perquisites. So that 95,000 will only be chargeable to the employee cost. Then comes cost related to the labor turnover. Labor turnover is a very important thing. We will just see in our next slides to come. So any cost related to labor turnover, like if say 10 employees have left and we are again going to recruit those 10 people, so that will not form the cost relating to that. Engaging those 10 persons, again, their training, their recruitment, everything will not be included in the employee cost. And then unamortized amount related to discontinued operations. Suppose some company has discontinued one segment. So if there is any amount which is to be like unamortized amount is there as expenditure, so that will also not to be included in the employee cost. Next, employee cost reporting as per CAS 7. Direct employee costs shall be presented as a separate cost head in the cost statement. Whenever we are preparing our schedule 2A, our direct employee cost will be shown separately, and indirect employee cost shall be presented in cost statements as a part of overheads relating to respective functions like manufacturing, administration, and marketing. As I have just told you, that whatever indirect expenditure is there on the employees, that will be booked under the respective overheads, respective production overheads, admin overheads, and marketing overheads. This will not form the part of direct employee cost. So CAS 7 very clearly bifurcates the labor cost or employee cost into two parts: direct employee cost and indirect employee cost. So we have to be very clear about this. And in case of indirect employee cost, we have to charge this to the respective overhead, and we should never do some mistake to book these under the various overheads. I think this is clear. Next is a method of wage payment. Yeah, this is very important, and in examination you always get some question about this wage payment, wage calculation according to these various kind of systems. There are few methods of wage payment. One is dependent on the time rate system, that is the ordinary rate, or you call it daily wages. So it is a daily rate system or monthly rate system, whatever you call. Under this, we have three types. In three ways we can pay. Like one is ordinary rate, another is high rate, and third one is graduated rate. Then comes piece rate. In case of piece rate, in case of time rate, we make the payment according to the time a worker or an employee is spending in our organization. In case of piece rate, we are making the payment to the employee
We lost your voice for a
production
while.
rate. It's now it's okay.
Yeah, it's better now.
Yeah, this piece rate. Hello.
It's all good now.
This piece rate is for the direct workers. It is not for the employees like staff or people, a person like sales manager or production manager. You cannot pay on piece rate basis. So this piece rate basis is only for the direct people who are directly engaged in the production process. So here again we have three ways to make the payment. One is simple rate, another is guaranteed day rate. Guaranteed day rate is what? It is a mix of these two things: simple rate, a simple piece rate plus the ordinary day rate. Means what it simply means, suppose I have to pay to a worker on the basis of 100 tons per, suppose he is say making 100 kgs of some product. in a day. So if he is making 100 kgs, I will be paying him 200 rupees. Means 2 rupees per kg is the rate, is a simple rate. So, but if he is not able to make the payment, if he is not able to say desired production of 100 kgs, so that person will not be paid 200 rupees. He will be paid whatever production he has made. Suppose he has made only 50 kgs, so he is liable to get 100 rupees. But 100 rupees is too less daily wage for a worker who has spent say 8 hours in your organization. So there, certain organizations give the ordinary rate for that particular day. Say ordinary rate is 150 rupees. So that worker, despite of the low production, he will be paid 150 rupees. So this is a guaranteed day rate. Here, piece rate is also considered and day rate is also considered. So whatever is more is paid to the worker. Then there is a differential rate. Differential rate is also like that whatever. Suppose differential rate is say 100 kg is our average production, and then a worker who has become more efficient in that production, he can make up to 120 kgs. So a rate for 100 kg production, which is the average production, may be 2 rupees a kg. And for if a person is taking 120 kgs per day, so his rate can be 2 rupees 25 paisa. So that person who is making 120 rupees will get double benefit. Number one, he is getting paid more for those 20 kgs, and he is additionally getting 25 paisa more for the 100 kgs which he is supposed to produce even in the normal course of working. So this piece rate is like differential rate. So this is how we can pay them. Then bonus system. Bonus system is like if an individual is producing say for complete week, he has achieved 100 kgs of production. Like for 6 days, he has achieved 600 kgs of production, 100 kg per day. So he will be getting a bonus. Or suppose in we can have a scheme like if in place of 600 is the average wage, and say 120 at the rate of 120, he has to produce 720 to get the differential rate. But he has not produced 720, nor he is more than 600 and less than 720. So we can offer them some bonus. Like if he has produced 650, so for 50 kgs, we will give them some bonus. So that will be individual bonus. So whatever extra he has produced, so for that we will provide them some incentive. Then there is a group bonus scheme. Like certain production processes are such that one person alone cannot do much. If the whole team is working, only then they can produce more. So for that, that kind of production systems, group bonus is the usual incentive. So they will suppose in a group they have produced say 500 kgs per day. So they will get the if they produce above 500 kgs per day, they will get some group bonus. So that group bonus will be accordingly divided amongst the group members. Then bonus for indirect workers. This is again a very subjective thing. Depends company to company that how they are distributing that bonus. Sometimes it is an annual bonus, which is as per the Payment of Bonus Act, or sometimes they provide some incentives for the better sales, for the better production, like that. So this is again a bonus system. Then indirect monetary incentives. What are that? That is one is profit sharing and another is co-partnership. Profit sharing, we all know that if our company has earned 100 crores of profit, say 20% of it, we will share it with our staff. So 20 lakhs will be shared amongst all the employees of the company. So, and co-partnerships is for the smaller partnership organization that sometimes even they go for the this also, like stock option schemes or some equity sharing schemes, equity participation scheme. So this way we can give some indirect monetary incentives, and then non-monetary incentives. In this, workers are getting medical facility, education facility, welfare schemes, some job security. So all these things are like a way to remunerate our workforce. Then there is an important part which is overtime. Overtime, what is overtime? Overtime is, you must have heard that every now and then people say, "Arey, overtime kar raha hu." You know, many people say that during Diwali time or during higher production time, like in summers, the people of cooler manufacturing units or AC manufacturing units, they will be working overtime. Overtime is what? It is time spent on the job beyond the normal working hours. If my job is for 8 hours and I am working for say 10 hours on a particular day beyond the 2 hours beyond the working day, so that 2 hours are known as overtime. Overtime is usually paid as per the Factories Act. Overtime is to be paid at the double of the normal rate. Suppose my normal wage rate is 250 rupees per day. So in case of overtime or say 100 rupees per hour, so my normal overtime working wage will be 200 rupees per hour. So this is how as per Factories Act, we have to pay almost double the normal wage rate. But usually it is like every company is not following that, but certainly everyone is paying slightly higher amount for the normal, slightly higher than the normal wage rate for the overtime spent in the job. And that extra amount payment, whatever extra amount is being payable beyond the normal wages and salaries, beyond the normal working hours, is called overtime premium. Like say my normal working rate is 100 rupees and I am being paid at 150 rupees. So that 50 rupees is the overtime premium. So there is a different provision for a different treatment in cost records for overtime premium and overtime regular wages. So as per CAS 7, overtime premium shall be assigned directly to the cost object or treated as overheads depending on the economic feasibility and specific circumstances requiring such overtime. So what are these specific circumstances? That if the work has been done due to urgencies of the work, if I have say a certain order which I have to complete in a prescribed time, for that I have to do the urgent overtime work. In that case, direct labor cost, whatever is the normal rate, say 100 rupees per hour is the normal rate. So that will go in the direct labor cost, and whatever extra overtime premium we are paying, that will be part of production overheads. So if I'm paying 150 rupees per hour, so out of that 100 rupees will go to the direct labor cost and 50 rupees will go to the production overheads. Then if that overtime is being worked at the request of the customer, suppose I'm a like garment manufacturer and there is a school uniform time, and my customer wants that I should supply those uniforms in a prescribed time, in the less time, and he is ready to pay me the premium for that. So in that case, the whole direct wages will be charged to the job. So because we have we have asked our staff to work overtime only on the request of our customers, so that particular extra wages will be charged to that particular job. Then if due to lack of capacity we have to work hard, we have to work overtime, so that will be treated as direct wages only. Suppose I have a short capacity, and because of that short capacity, I have to run my plant, say 4 hours extra. My staff has to do 4 hours extra overtime. So that entire wage will be treated as the direct wages. Just a moment. Then if there are certain conditions like abnormal conditions like flood, earthquake, there for that reason we have to work extra, then that has to be charged to the costing profit and loss account. This will neither go to direct wages nor it will go to any overheads. It will be directly charged to the costing profit and loss account. Then next, we will just see the idle time. Idle time is a very interesting thing, for which we have the time we have spent in the organization, no work has been done, and wages are paid. Full wages have been paid. So idle time cost represents the wages paid for the time lost during which the worker does not work. And here, one important thing is because of no fault of the worker. If worker is at fault, then definitely it will not be considered as idle time. For that, there should be a penalty to the worker. Then as per CAS 7, what CAS 7 speaks about this, that idle cost shall be assigned direct to the cost object or treated as overheads, depending upon the economic feasibility. So here also, if it is unavoidable idle time, that will be considered in job. What is unavoidable time? Like there was a hailstorm, and due to hailstorm, some tree fell down on your work shed. Then you could not work for say 5 hours. So that is the unavoidable. That is unavoidable idle time. So it has to be considered for that particular job. Suppose you are on a construction site. On a construction site, heavy rain or heavy these stones are there, has happened. So due to that, the construction work was stopped for 4 hours. So that was unavoidable. The work could not have been done. It is none fault of nobody. So that will be considered, that whatever idle time we are paying, that will be considered in the job. That will be considered as the labor cost. And normal idle time, suppose we know that every Wednesday there is a power cut, or every Saturday there is a power cut of 6 hours. But we cannot do. That is a normal thing. We cannot avoid that particular power cut. So that will become the part of production overheads. That will not be treated as the labor, because that is already known to me that I am going to pay this 6 hours idle cost. So for that purpose, either I plan my things accordingly, or else I allow this to be part of the production overhead. That in any case cannot be treated as labor cost or employee cost. Then abnormal idle time, that is also not to be included in cost. As I have already given you the example of COVID. Like during COVID, nobody worked, but everybody got the salaries. So this has gone to the costing profit and loss account. It has not gone to the direct cost, direct employee cost, or nor it has gone to any of the overheads. So similarly, if there are such circumstances like there is a flood, so because of flood we cannot work, or there is something like which is abnormal, so that all goes to the costing profit and loss account. Then comes the labor turnover. This is a very interesting part. Labor turnover is change in the labor force during a specified period. We all know that if we are working in some organization, so today or tomorrow we have to leave. So even in case of government organizations, we tend to get transfers, we tend to get retired, we tend to get even layoff. So everywhere, it is irrespective of the government sector or private sector, we are supposed to get out of that particular work. Change in the labor force is bound to happen, but it should be under a specified range. It should not be beyond that. Like if we have employee turnover of say 50%, that is not at all advisable. It is not at all acceptable. So what are the factors which lead to the employee turnover? Number one is nature of industry. There are certain industries in which labor turnover is more. Like if you see at leather industry, labor turnover is more because there is so much of smell that it is very difficult for anyone to work there in that industry. Then size of the industry. Sometimes what happens that there is a small organization where there is not much scope of growth is there. So because of the size, there is growth restrictions. So people tend to leave in say some small times, say 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So size of company is one of the factor. Location also is sometimes some location, some company is located in a very remote area or in a Naxal hit area or at a very high altitude. So there also, so depending upon the location, that is one factor which leads to the labor turnover. Then composition of force. Sometimes the labor force is so composed of that that automatically gives labor to migrate from there to give rise to the labor turnover. So these are the few factors. Then what can be the probable causes of labor turnover? One is the personal cause, like some particular place didn't suit me, some particular environment didn't suit me, I had certain health issues in that area, or there is some family problem. So all these are personal causes for labor turnover. Then certain unavoidable circumstances are there, like something happened in a particular area, like because of flood, the entire thing washed out. So labor has to migrate from there. So that is another cause. Then avoidable causes are also there, which organization could have avoided but could not avoid. So those are certain causes. Then effects. What are the effects of labor turnover? Now, first and foremost effect is it reduces the productivity. If my 5 trained persons have gone out and 5 new persons have come in, so I have to train those 5 persons. They have to have on the job training, off the job training, and then only they will be starting working in the organization. And to achieve that kind of efficiency which my earlier 5 people were having, they may take some time. So it, for that particular time duration, that my overall productivity will get reduced. Then cost will increase. Definitely when my few people are leaving and I'm appointing new persons, then my recruitment cost is there, then my training cost is there, and maybe that new persons, maybe you may need to hire at a higher rate. So there is a cost increase also. Cost escalation is also there. Then what are the preventive costs? And there are certain preventive costs and there are certain replacement costs related to labor turnover. What are preventive costs? Preventive costs are those costs which we are incurring for longer stay of our employees in the organization. Number one can be like to provide them a good environment, to give them certain extra perquisites, to give them certain more facilities. These are all like preventive. Give them enough opportunities to grow, give them enough scope to work in a free environment. So these are all like these, whatever cost we are incurring on these heads, these are all preventive costs. And then replacement cost, like as I discussed, that employment recruitment cost and training cost, these are the replacement costs. And then there are certain measures, the measurement of labor turnover. So there are certain methods to measure the labor turnover. One is additions method, then separation method, replacement method, and flux method. If required, you can ask me in the group. I will explain each and every method through their formulas. But these are very simple numerical calculations. You can very easily understand. So this is all from my side. And I think this must be clear. If there's any question, you can ask. Otherwise, it's over to Arvind.
Thank you very much. So I had one question. You mentioned about the amortization while you were discussing the employee cost. Do you mind giving some more detail with some examples, like what exactly this concept is about?
Yes. In India, like every time we have to provide gratuity to the people who are retiring. Suppose the person is retiring at the age of 60. So at that very time, if I make the payment of few lakhs to him, so that will be an abnormal cost to the company. So what company does, company keeps a provision of gratuity, creates a provision of gratuity every year. Say if they have like staff of say 500 people, some will be in the 50s, some will be of 55. So accordingly, there is a complete valuation that is known as actuarial valuation of gratuity. So they keep on doing that, and every year they keep on providing a provision for that provision for the gratuity, though they have not made that payment of gratuity in that very year, but they are providing it for the future. So that is all allowable under the employee cost. Second can be like if the company has not provided for the gratuity provisions are not there, but still at the time of retirement or at the time of sudden death of some employee or some other incidents because of which the employee is retiring. So at that time, company has to pay certain amount. So whatever amount is there that they have paid on that particular day, but that was not related to that very year, so they can amortize. Suppose due to some accidental death, some employee has like expired and the company has to pay some amount, say 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs rupees. So that does not relate to that very year. So that can be amortized over a period of 5 years, 7 years. So that amortization is allowable as employee cost. That can be added in the employee cost. This is basically the provision.
Okay, good. Thank you. And also I was thinking, like when you mentioned about the overtime cost, it's good to know that the laws are in place. But I'm just curious if those laws are not followed by the employer, is any course of action the employee can take, and how successful those are if somebody can do those things? Do you mind shedding some light on that?
Yeah, actually that is all part of labor laws, but labor laws are in place, no doubt. And if somebody is able, some employee goes and complains tomorrow that I have worked this much overtime and I have not got the proper wages, so definitely some action will be there. And even there are penal provisions also in that law. At this moment I don't remember them exactly, but there are penal provisions for any non-compliance related to the labor laws. Like Indian government and Indian laws are very much sensitive about the labor welfare.
Okay, but at the same time, the employees may not be aware of those laws or any things which are in their favor, and they may not even pursue those things, is it?
Yeah, that happens sometimes. That happens. Okay. For that, like nobody can help. Yeah, if you are working in some organization, then usually these trade unions keep on educating the workers. That is their basic role. Mm-hmm. So, but that is also not very, their role is also not very positive, I will say. But otherwise it is good.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So I guess it's high time to conclude the session. Any question, please feel free to put in the WhatsApp group. And that's it for now. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Same to you. Bye.